It's high noon.
Welcome to episode number 26 of Foul Play. That's Fantasy Overwatch League play. Week 3 is all set and done. Things are calming down a little bit, I think, overall in the Overwatch League scene. We're becoming able to predict things slightly better. It's still pretty up in the air. We've definitely learned our lesson from getting too confident about these things, but yeah, things are wrapping up a little bit here for this stage. Very little time left overall in stage 1. This week and next week are going to be big. We're starting to see less games played overall throughout the course of the week. And next week, we only have 2 days. There's only 8 matches in total. So we're going to be looking at that a little bit closer next week, but also it's already on our radar. And for fantasy owners, it needs to be something you're planning for and playing around right now. They're going to be coming up a couple other times with the away games, things like that. But before I get too deep into things, I should probably introduce my co-hosts here. Asmith and the Blevins are with me this week. Asmith, how you doing today, my friend?
I am so good and good with this Yoo-Hoo, sponsored by Yoo-Hoo. I wish.
Not actually a sponsor. You do have to be careful about saying things like that. Also not a sponsor is
actually cat milk.
Also not a sponsor is the Girl Scouts of America, and Blevins is all chock full of his Samoas. But otherwise, Blevins, other than that, how can you be bad when you're chock full of Samoas? But otherwise, buddy, how you doing this week?
I'm doing great. Clearly and obviously the best Girl Scout cookie. Anyone who says anything but this is probably crazy. So
hands down,
not close.
Agreed.
I think this might be the only thing that all 3 hosts have been unanimously in agreement on.
Yep.
It's like I was a little worried. I thought I was going to have to fight.
No,
I was going to have to fight the good fight for Samoas, but
no,
you guys,
Samoas are the 101 pick. Just as much as Jonak was going into the season, there was no questions, had to be, got to be Samoas. Maybe someday we'll draft Girl Scout cookies. We'll have to wait and see. But let's move on. That's an off-season topic. I don't want to get everybody too excited. That's an off-season topic. But I want to talk a little bit, since we couldn't do this last week, gentlemen, we want to talk about exactly how we're doing in our expert leagues. We've got the Podcasters Showdown League hosted by Totally Drunk over at Owl by the Numbers, and we've got our Foul Play Experts League. That's a little bit more just the, every host of all the fantasy shows have their own team sort of a thing. It's a little more closed off. But Asmith, talk to us about really how your last 2 weeks have gone in those leagues, because everybody's behind.
Last 2 weeks, I have won both my last 2 weeks in the Foul Play League. Hey, I beat the Blevins, so it's a good week. Yep, you got to kick the noobs. But the other league, I went 1-1, I believe. I was leading into the last day, and then Architect just couldn't get me more than 24 points, and all I needed was 25 or something like that. I don't know, but it was really, really close.
Yeah, I know I lost in a non-expert league, so I don't have to admit it to you guys, but I will anyways. I lost by 20-something points with Sure4 in my lineup, and it was just... it was an oof. The oof of all oofs on the week, for sure. Blevins, how'd you do in your expert leagues?
In the Podcaster Showdown League, I am 3-0, so continuing as I usually do in these fantasy leagues, just completely dominating you clowns, even though I had... Oh, no, actually, I wasn't starting Aid. I had Aid on my team. It's really hard for me to get rid of him. I haven't found a way to get rid of Aid yet. It seems like he's a permanent fixture in my life right now.
Can't just get rid of Aid. Aid is permanent.
That is a meme there.
Aid is permanent.
Yeah.
But no, I have the best team in the league, and I have the best team name in the league. And
well,
none
listen.
of you named your teams yet, so
I just want to pump the brakes a little bit, because you're talking a lot of smack Considering the other 3-0 team in that league is in this call, that would be me. I won both of my expert leagues this week. I'm 3-0. Me and Blevins are running roughshod over that league, which includes Asmith, who's just embarrassing himself, to be perfectly honest with you.
It's okay. We only need to have the top 2 spots. The third spot we can pittily give to another spot.
This is the one league out of my 8 leagues that I'm just like, meh, you know what? Who cares? The other two the other two podcast hosts are gonna lead it.
Smart to plan it that way with an expert league, Smith. That's one thing I'll say.
Is it experts? we have some people in there that I mean,
it's one of the 2 we're doing on the show, so you might want to adjust your attitude as far as foul play. As far as the foul play experts league goes, I'm 2-1 there. Bounced back after a loss last week that Cool Matt handed me after he lost his job to Spree. Both of the teams I really like of mine in both of these leagues, so I think I'm in for a good season. But man, the meta is going to be shaken up really soon. But before we get into that, let's talk about some leaders from last week in week 3. We're going to start things off in the support category. A. Smith, pick one of these 3 gentlemen and talk to us about them.
Look, I'll take the Shanghai Dragons. I will take Luffy here. Luffy put up 361.07 and 209.07. That is good for second and first overall. That dude was a monster. 5 games against Dallas helps, especially when you almost win and then you throw. So, I mean, they just wanted to get to that 5th map. That's what they wanted to do. So they got there. He got me us those fantasy points. Shanghai looking good. We'll see. They're playing Dallas again next week, so you might expect similar results.
Yeah, pretty easy to see map 5 potential in that matchup. Blevins, talk to us about another support leader from last week.
Yeah, I'll spare you the agony of having to speak positively about a Boston player, but so I'll take Aim God here. They had a pretty decent week. They won against Soul Dynasty and then lost a relatively close-ish match against Toronto Defiant. So 1-1 on the week, not too shabby. Aim God had almost entered the 400 club in combined with 376.94, which was good for first overall support in combined, second overall in terms of best game at 205.8. He is in no small part the reason why I've been winning in the podcaster league, as well as I also own the second leader, or one of the last leader in this group on my team as well.
Yeah, we get it. You made a deal with the devil. Great, good for you. But our number 3 leader.
Or Soul Drink, whoever you want to compare him with. I'm just saying.
Hey, babe, that's how you got the free agility as Jonak for pick 101 there.
It was a mock draft. A mock draft didn't even count.
You made a mockery of it, that's for certain. Yes. But moving on, we've got Shu here from the Guangzhou Charge. He came in combined 349.65. That was good for 4th among supports and 199.33 in the best game format. Again, good for 4th place. Listen, the Guangzhou Charge, you might be like me and have no idea how to make sense of this team, heads nor tails. But one thing we can say is if they can go to map 5s against teams that I think are much better than them, that's great for fantasy. And if they can go to map 5s against teams that I think are much worse than them, that's also great for fantasy. So the Guangzhou Charge, really Hotba, Shu, Happy, all guys I'm kind of targeting right now, trying to get my hands on. The ups and downs here, it's going to be good for us, I think, in fantasy. They're definitely a team to watch. Let's move into the DPS category. Blevins, I gave you a hard time about him last week. Lead us off so you can get the team you want to talk about here.
Yeah. I'm looking at the wrong thing. I want Ivy. Ivy here for my DPS. He was in combined actually the number 1 overall, 327.79, or number 1 for DPS, and he was good for second in best with 196.45. I mean, we've seen it, and it reflected again this week. Toronto players, when they actually play, are high point scoring players. Toronto is on a good streak. They've got, at the very least, winnable, if not good, favored matchups for them. They have not blown out anyone. I think Boston was the closest to a blowout we've seen at a 3-1, and it wasn't really even a blowout. Defiant looks, Defiant players are, it's probably too late, but if you haven't already, buy. Get those Toronto Defiant players on your team as soon as possible.
Never too late to trade. Not everybody is as plugged into the numbers as you might be if you're listening to this show. So definitely, a bit of a buy low opportunity there, potentially before their household names and everybody actually knows how good these guys are. Very close to his score in the single game, or I'm sorry, the best game format was Fleta. He was just less than a full point, like 0.98 points behind Fleta here, who had 197.47 in the best format, which was first. And then he had 276.66, which was good for 10th in the combined scoring format. Sold despite no map fives, really across the board looked really good. We could have very easily included Jaehong in the leaders section. Shu was just a little bit more of a surprise. This is what we were hoping for from Fleta. This is what people, if you took Fleta early, first, second round, you were putting some faith in him. These are the kind of performances you wanted to see. The team's far from, locked and loaded, got everything figured out. But at least this week, everything came together for a good fantasy performance here. Really did quite well across both of their games, which included a matchup against the New York Excelsior, which is tough to get points in that one in particular. Blevins, round us out with our third DPS leader.
You already got the second one.
But I'll do it anyway.
Asmith. No, Asmith.
Got him. All right. Look, the last one here is Sinatra. San Francisco Shock. He put up 326.96. That's good for second. And 167.91. That's good for ninth. Look, Sinatra is becoming a mainstay. I think he is a mainstay with this meta, and he's the only real mainstay right now I can see in this meta with the Shock, with their ever-changing flopping of players. Okay, yes, I know there is Violet, but other than that, Sinatra has been popping off. He's a very, very, very good Zarya, and San Francisco has a tendency to go to game fives. Another player that just missed this list, but I think is deserving of it, would be Color Hex of Boston. Put up 317.84 and 174.32. He's right in there with Sinatra on both of those. That guy popped off, man, and that's good to see from the Australian, scene. It's good to see a player like that to be able to make a jump. And I don't know.
He was Australian, isn't he?
He's New Zealand, but he's in the Australian scene. He was on the Australian circuit, so.
Sorry,
not a New Zealand
sorry,
circuit.
Uber. I'm not counting it. They get their own. They get their own tally. Yeah, he did really, really well. We'll be talking about him briefly in just a few minutes. We're gonna move into the tanks. Man, I'm gonna take this one, Blevins. I want to talk about Envy. Another Toronto player had a really, really good week. It's amazing the consistency these guys have had. They've been competitive in every game, regardless of opponent. It's really showing up here. Envy, the flex tank, got 278.88 in the combined format, good for second place, and in the best game format, 166.69. That's good for third place, but that is exactly 2 points below Note, who was at the top. So very, very close to just being at the absolute top of that particular leaderboard there. But yeah, Asmith, talk to us about tank number 2.
Look, I'll take a Note here from Boston Uprising. 300.
I just can't do that.
Yeah, I know you can. I know you can. And as much as I dislike them, I can at least speak a little bit. Mainly because their owner is now going to prison. What? Anyways, 308.31 in combined. That's first overall, and then 168.69 in best, and that was first overall as well. Look, Note popped off. Game fives. They just, the way they play when they're playing well, Note is gonna. I think Note's gonna get a lot of points in this meta. So if they continue to play well and Fusions really helps enable Note, it's going to be a good I guess there's only 2 more weeks left of it, but hey, it should be a good 2 more weeks for Note.
Yeah, hard to pay too much attention to the diva player that's harassing you on the flank or wherever he is when you have a player like Fusions just WM1ing into your team's face the entire time. Also, side note, misdemeanors don't usually land people in prison, so Robert Kraft probably going to be just fine.
Hoping.
But if the world was just, you would be correct. Blevins, wrap the tank conversation up for us here.
Yeah, we'll go with Michelle here of the Soul Dynasty. 234.55 in combined, which is good for fifth for the tank spot. 168.67. Again, like you mentioned, very slim margin here for the best format between first, second, and third. Exactly 2 points separated first and third there, with Michelle being right in the middle. Actually, it was almost a point, almost exactly a point between each of them. But the interesting thing about Seoul, and you mentioned it with Fleta, is that they suffered two losses this week versus Boston and versus New York. So it's a very telling and very valuable thing to know. Hey, even if my team is going to lose, even if my player's team is going to lose, they can still produce points. We did not see that as much last year. Even when there was guaranteed play time, we saw Florida Mayhem players, we saw Shanghai Dragons players for most of the season just not be great. We've seen teams that win and don't get a lot of points. It's nice to see teams that can lose two matches on the day, on the week, and still have respectable point totals.
Yeah, one thing I want to point out here before we move on, if you're in the unlimited leagues, we have an unlimited league up on the highnoon.gg platform. We're noticing a trend here when we do these leaders, and that's that when a player shows up, one of his teammates probably shows up. We talked about Color Hex could have easily been included here. So was Note. We talked about how Rijay Hong had a really, really, really good week. Didn't quite make this list. So did Michelle, so did Fleta. Ivy's here, Envy's here. The exceptions
Neko's probably top 5 for supports too.
Neko had a very good week. So if you're in unlimited leagues, stack them up. Make your bet, find the team you like, and stack a couple of players in there from the same team, because if you're right, it's going to pay dividends. And yeah, Toronto looks like a very safe option. I know that was they were crucial to my build around for this week, going into their matchups, and it paid off for me. I climbed a bunch in the leaderboards there. It's a double-edged sword. If you stack them up and you're wrong and the matchup's a blowout and the team doesn't do great, you do poorly. But something definitely to keep an eye on if you're lower on the leaderboard, want to make a push, have a really strong feeling about a match that might go to 5, something like that. That's where you really want to take your chances. But let's go in and talk about some feeders here. We're going to start with support. I'll lead us off. My boy Raucus, man. What can you say when your coach screws up and submits the wrong lineup and you have to sit a map because of that? And then he came out 4th map as well. They only had the 1 match, so a rough go for Raucus here. But I do want to say 97.7 points for 2 maps.
Not bad.
That tells me when he was playing, Raucus was popping off. He was doing really well. So he shows up in the feeder list. But from a fantasy perspective, I mean, it's something you only have to do when you lose. But chalk it up to a win for Raucus here, because I think he looked good. We know his job's not in jeopardy, anything like that. I don't think we have to worry about that. They gave us the insight to know Bonnie was not prepping even a little bit for stepping in that spot, at least for this stage. Nothing to worry about there. Asmith,
Hasn't that happened before? Hasn't it happened before? I think I remember Houston submitting the wrong lineup for some point. Last year.
There could have been something, but I don't think it was like wrote the wrong player name down. I think it was like they were late going into like a map 5 to submit, or it was not quite the same.
Well,
I was like, that's just
so jacked that it's hard for him to hold the pen.
So swole, he can't. It's not who's their head coach?
Tyrone. It's Tyrone's job. They basically
that didn't fit the joke.
They basically threw him under the bus when they had their press conference. They were all kind of laughed about it. It's easy to laugh about it and not care when you win the match. So good on Houston for that one at least. A. Smith, talk to us about a support feeder here.
Look, I'll take Twilight here for Vancouver. Put up 99.68 points in both. They only played 1 match. She was 35th and 33rd. I do believe Repel played one of the maps, if I'm not mistaken.
I don't remember that, but
survey says
if it's a stop, I do turn out a little more.
Survey says Repel has 40.15 points on the week.
Yep. So another case of didn't play the whole time because his team was stomping. So anyways, that may not be the exact reason why Raucus didn't play, but still, if the team just stomps so hard that they decide to put the
garbage
bench
time.
yep, it's a very interesting thing to look at. And I know a lot of people drafted Twilight high and were riding on him to get a big points there, and that really hurt you.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess it's worth pointing out, if Raucous and Twilight got roughly the same number of points, Raucous played 2 maps, Twilight played 3. Does that mean Twilight's only 2/3 as good as Raucous is? I think
For
that's
one
what that
match,
means.
maybe.
I don't know. Just trying to make sense of it, put it into perspective. Maybe
There
maybe tilt some people
Trying to
too
get there.
along the way. If that happens, all the better. Blevins, who's our last support feeder on the week?
Last support feeder here is going to be Neptuno. Neptuno, of course, the support player from Philadelphia Fusion, 97.72 points on the week in both, having only played 1 match. That's good for 36th and 35th, respectively. I mean, they played against the Washington Justice. They stomped the Washington Justice. It's not a good look for your team when you're, curb stomping a team. You're not getting a lot of points. It's not what you're expecting.
Yeah, if Lucios are going to deal damage, the other team has to be alive for a little while in order to get shot at. And when it's a stomp, the Lucio is going to get harder than most. And Lucios are going to be up and down. You're throwing a Hail Mary when you try to play a Lucio player and hoping it works out. And in this case, it didn't. Neptuno should be fine going forward. DPS feeders for this week. Blevin, start us off. You got one in here.
Yep, I do. I will go with Libero, the New York Excelsior, 173.76 in combined, 92.72 in best. That's 24th and 38th overall. It's kind of the opposite case of the Defiant. They played 2 matches. New York won both the matches 3-1. But they're not, Libero is not scoring the points that, an Ivy, an Envy, a Stellar, even a Roki or a Neko is going to score in these 3-1, either not necessarily lopsided, but, these 3-1 matches, you're just not getting the points out of Libero. Even last season with SBB in the 4-0s, SBB was still a top point scorer most weeks. But just the way that the meta is playing and that Libero fits into their composition, it's just not a high fantasy point scoring position right now.
Asmith, who's the next one?
Look, the next one's the guy who got me, man. Architect put up 24.94 points in both, and yes, his team played in 2 games. Guess what that means? He got benched hard, and to be honest, they played Rascal. They're no longer cowards. And Rascal looked a lot better than Architect in the position he was playing. I believe he's the Brigitte.
Mm-hmm.
And man, I don't expect to see Architect again this season unless Rascal just has a stage. Sorry, not season, stage. While Brigitte is still meta, because unless Rascal just has a really, really, really bad map, I wouldn't expect to see it. Or Rascal looked too good. Architect is probably done for this stage.
Well, the last one here, and before I get to him, shout-outs to Surefour for getting benched for Decay this week and screwing me out of a couple of wins. Appreciate you. But when it's due to playtime, we try not to include too many of those here. It's a boring conversation. Hacksaw from the Vancouver Titans is number 3 here. He had 120.61 in combined and in best. That's 38th and 33rd overall. 120 is just a little lackluster. We're talking about DPSs right at the edge of that 200 barrier. This is considerably lower for a big team. Again, a little bit the New York problem. They're almost too good for their own good in fantasy, and it hurts Hacksaw some. I think he's going to be fine going forward. When we get to a DPS meta especially, he should be able to shine once again because he's absolutely lights out amazing on some of these DPS heroes, or at least has been in the past. So excited to see that. Use him as you've been. His playtime's not threatened or anything like that, so he's fine. It just didn't work out this week. Look for better, closer matchups if you can find them. Moving on, we've got the tank conversation to wrap things up. Blevins, your boys aren't faring well. You've got another one.
Yeah, mono here is one of the feeders, 184.3 and 110.43 respectively for 17th and 26th. Yeah, I mean, it's just the case that the way that NYXL plays, their individual positions are not getting as many points as some of the others. You know, even though I think from a gameplay perspective and from a team cohesion perspective, obviously NYXL looks absolutely fantastic. And not only that, their tank play looks absolutely fantastic. Does not matter from a fantasy point perspective. They're not doing the things that are leading them to get massive amounts of fantasy points, which is just unfortunate from an owner perspective, from a fantasy owner perspective. That being said, you're probably weren't paying a ton for Mono necessarily because he wasn't a huge point scorer last year, so he didn't have that like, oh well, he's definitely going to score a ton of points factor. Although maybe savvy people got burned because they knew Janice wasn't going to be around to take his playtime. Regardless, probably still a keep, but maybe he's a tank 2 and maybe even a tank 3 depending on the league that you're in.
Yeah, I think he's a fine play for a week 2, but anytime you're only putting up 70 points in one of your matchups, which he did this week, it's cause for concern. And it's just there's no more stark reminder here that fantasy points don't equal Overwatch League success, because Mono is like flipping the script on everybody's top 5 tank lists, everything like that. Like, he has shot up to the top of mine, and a lot of other people's with his performance this stage, just not quite coming together. The second tank feeder here, I'm gonna go with Space. Listen, this is the guy. I drafted him in the draft we did last week, like second round or something like that. I had the first pick overall, so it was late. This is, mechanically speaking, very possibly your best off tank in Overwatch League. There's a couple others that are certainly there. The Valiant struggles. Listen, they haven't won a game yet. He's been fine so far, even though that's been true, but they've been more competitive than they were this week. Still did okay in combined. You know, he got 13th. That's pretty solid. But in best game, 29th with 108.61. So if you played him in the best format, it hurt you way, way worse than it did if you played him in combined. If you're in combined, let that be a lesson to you. 2 games from somebody that plays every map is always going to be really good. Asmith, who's the last feeder?
The last one is a guy who I have on my team, a couple of my teams, Roar from the Los Angeles Gladiators. 191.05 and 100.81. That's 15th and 34th. A noticeable thing is all 3 of these tanks have been in the top 20 in combined, which is good, I mean, that's a tank 1 tank or a tank 2. So yes, that's good, but at the same time, when they're putting up 100 points, that's 34th tank overall. That's rough. I mean, nothing to say. Roar has been good, mainly probably because the Gladiators have been going to game 5s and Roar's been playing every time. But Roar has not been good this game. He took a noticeable downturn in both matches. So I expect to see him go back, but it'll be interesting for sure.
All right, we're going to move things along here. We've got a couple waiver wire pickups we want to talk about, and like a couple weeks ago, this is a little bit 2 different conversations. So let's talk about players that we want to target for the rest of this stage for right now. We talked about wanting to look forward, week 5 with its shallow schedule, but week 2, we know something about the meta that we're likely to see. If for no other reason than it was very clearly directed towards killing goats so that it doesn't hurt, doesn't impact Overwatch League further. But yeah, let's talk about this week for now. Asmith, give us 2 options of guys that might be available for people to look at that they can use pretty immediately.
Okay, I'll take both of Boston's offensive players, DPS players, Colorhex and Blase. Look, they're both the only DPS players on Boston. They're going to get playtime. Boston looks better with fusions. Boston can win games now. They don't look just horrible. With them being able to win games, I mean, their players are going to do well. Colorhex and Blase both were top 10, I think, DPS this week. So that's something to really look at. I think they're going to succeed in this stage. I don't know how next stage will fare for them, but I do know this stage they're going to look good.
Yeah, the two I want to talk about here is one is probably not available. He was drafted fairly high in a lot of leagues I saw, but Decay just became active and showed he's playing all the time. Just double check and make sure. You never know. Somebody needed the spot really bad last week or something like that, wasn't confident, made the move, had to drop him. That's going to happen, especially in your combined scoring leagues. So definitely keep an eye out for that. I'd swing by to pick him up.
I will say he was available in one of the leagues that we are all in, so we have snapped him up. Whoop, just saying.
It can certainly happen, and it doesn't even mean anybody did anything wrong. It just means that's the way it had to go. The other one I want to talk about quick is Gu Shui. I've been harping on this for a couple weeks. He seems to have taken the starting job from No Smite, played all the maps in their final match. I'm still a little nervous about it, but not very. The way they talked in the interview after the match, everything like that, it does sound like it's his job now. So go ahead and pick up Gu Shui if he's available. And Blevins, you wrote one in last second here. So
I did.
Teach us all a lesson in how to put your personal feelings about your team aside and use a different brain for fantasy here.
Yes. So this it ties a little bit into the feeders section, I guess, but I guess the feeder here is me. We were very big on aid last week. All things pointed to Roki out, aid stays, Neko in to this fantastic Toronto Defiant team. Didn't happen that way. They played Roki all the maps for both of their matches. We saw no aid in sight. Aid has been done with that joke. But we saw we saw Roki and not Aid. Roki did put up a respectable amount of points. So even as the main support, he put up 222 and a $134 respectively. Looking very solid as a support too. If you have a weak spot, if you had a goose egg or someone who did not work out, Roki is definitely going to be a decent roster filler here. And it looks like he is going to be their main support for the remainder of the stage, at least. No signs of aid returning.
Yep. Take Blevin's word for it. I would not sign off on that 100%, but take Blevin's word for it.
I wouldn't sign off on it.
Blevins if you get a 0.
100% either, and I wouldn't say, take out one of your starters or one of your locked and loaded supports and put in Roki. I wouldn't even do that if I knew he was playing, because he's not going to be a top performer anyway. But if you do have a goose egg, if you do have someone, if you do have to make up some points, or you have a really low score, or just someone who didn't work out, Roki is definitely a support 2 to 2.5, I think, if he's playing. But it seems like if they were going to play aid, they would have played him. They would have played him again, or they would have played him at least a little bit.
Somebody's typing in Rascal here as well. I just want to say, maybe be a little mindful that he might not play 100% of the time. It is a little iffy there. Definitely worth a speculative ad for now. They're just doing so many roster swaps in San Francisco right now that I'm really, really worried about him. So keep that in mind as well. And just a reminder here as well, I want to stop before we talk about the stage 2 potential pickups. If you're doing quite well, winning, don't have any week 5 concerns, and got some spots to free up, look at your week 5 matchups. We've got Washington playing twice. We've got Paris playing twice. Those are going to be big signings if you're struggling in your combined scoring league. You
play soon?
Play
soon?
I would
play
honestly,
soon? What?
I would consider, even me would consider picking up and starting soon for week 5. Keep that in mind. Know what of your roster doesn't play at all, because there's some teams that just do not play in week 5.
A lot of teams, actually.
Yeah, a good number of them. So definitely keep that in mind as you go into this week and this waiver wire period. You'll always be better off if you can make your waiver moves that are out of necessity a week in advance, before 3/4 of the rest of your league is looking at them, thinking about them. You get first pick. Use that to your advantage. Now's the time to do it. Now we want to talk about some players. Listen, guys, we don't talk a lot about patch notes here, okay? But we've got to a little bit this time, because Blizzard went nuclear. They've changed so many things for this patch that's about to hit live servers, that is presumably our stage 2 patch, unless there's some crazy bugs that make it difficult. The patch looks geared at removing goats from the meta, definitively. And a big part of that reason is McCree's ultimate, which us at the High Noon podcast are obviously a big fan of that, seeing a buff that shreds through tanks now, just as it charges up ridiculously fast. It'll break Reinhardt shields, kill people behind it. Also, Junkrat grenades just casually deal 140 damage now. So if you account for the fact that there's going to be considerable misses there as well, because you're just spamming, it feels like every 10 grenades is going to be worth a point. Like that they throw out. And that's assuming a couple of them miss. Like they've got like a 65% hit rate. About 10 grenades fired will be a fantasy point if they have a 65%. It's insane. Junkrat outputs more damage than Ana can heal, than Mercy can heal, like even multiple healers stacked on top of each other. Junkrat out damages the healing. It's going to be a big factor. That means we're looking, at least speculatively, I'm advising you make adds to Junkrat players and McCree players that maybe are sitting on benches right now. The names we're going to list off aren't names that necessarily will play or will start, but if they do, they should succeed at the role that they'll be asked to do. One of them's Jake. If Junkrat's big, Jake is arguably, if not considered to be by most, the best Junkrat in the world. He just understands that hero in a way that's like not fair and doesn't make, like, it's just ridiculous. Go back to season 1 and watch some of him on Horizon Lunar Colony, just shutting anybody and everybody down as they tried to attack point 2. Ridiculous. Pick up Jake. I know I drafted him in our draft from last week because it was like the day the patch notes came out, and I'm just like, yes, please, I'll take him late. Other ones here: Taimu, Striker, Pine. These are all players that have
big boss.
Yeah, Striker is another one that performed very well on the Junkrat in season 1 when given the opportunity for Boston. Taimu and Pine are notable McCree players. I mean, we've got Mr. Good Aim and the Big Boss. I almost said Mr. Big Boss.
Mr. Big Boss is Abe. That's who that is.
Mr. Big
Aim. But yeah, and listen, we're not going to give you a full comprehensive list of everybody that has Junkrat and McCree in their hero pools, but
we need to pick them up first.
Right? Yeah, we can't give you all the ones. These are the ones we've already got waiver claims in on. But suffice it to say, anybody that's notably good on the hit scan heroes like Widowmaker, McCree, things like that, they're likely to see an uptick in value, more likely to hit the stage next in stage 2. And then your Junkrat players, I can't imagine a world where 140 damage from a Junkrat grenade isn't enough to make him every defense, like almost regardless of map, game mode. The only exception might be King of the Hill, where he just doesn't see a lot of play there. But yeah, or Control, I believe it's called officially. I never call it Control.
King of the Hill.
It's King of the Hill. Cough. But yeah, so pick up any McCree or Junkrat aficionados, anybody you want to spec on. They're all a bit of a shot in the dark because, as we saw with this stage, who knows who they're going to start just because we think it's the right call. Fraggy doesn't mean anything's going to happen. But yeah, so keep an eye on that. Definitely something to consider. You can, to an extent, predict what's going to happen in future metas even before you see them, or at least educatedly guess at them. All right, we teased on Twitter, gentlemen, we're going to be changing things up a little bit. We want to spend more time making fun of each other, less time reading off static information off of a sheet here. So instead of going team by team and discussing matchups and who's viable and who's not, we're going to trust that our sleeper section will do a pretty decent job of highlighting the teams whose matchups we like. And instead, we just want to talk to you guys about some of these matchups specifically that we think have really big 5 map potential or oof potential. And by oof, I mean it's gonna be brutally one-sided. New York's gonna appear quite often in the potential oof section, though not this week. So Asmith.
Say,
I was like, really?
Conspicuously in neither of these.
Weird.
A weird week for them, but they will get back to potential oofs later on, I promise. Let's do this where you guys each pick 2 and I pick 1 since I went with 5. Next week we'll try to pick out 6 that have potential, so it's a little more even. Asmith, sure. Give us 2 of these that you like the most for potential 5 mappers.
I'll take the obvious one in Dallas versus Shanghai.
Yeah.
We just saw him play 5 maps, so if logic serves, they play 5 maps again? I don't know.
Yeah, Logic's got cut. He's not in the league anymore.
Oh,
thank you, Mr. Logic.
Thank you, Mr. Logic. We appreciate your service. So hey, look, as long as Shanghai doesn't, Shang 9, then we should be good for maybe a win for Shanghai. I don't know, but I think 5 maps is good on that one, and I'll take Paris versus San Francisco on this. Paris versus San Francisco looks like a very interesting matchup. San Francisco looks like they're getting better, and Paris may look like they're on a little bit of a decline, but maybe they're just getting shown for who they really are. This is an upper mid-table matchup where both teams are going into it. Could be a slugfest, but it also has potential for a 4-0. We never know, but I like it to be a 5-mapper.
Definitely a good shot at it. Blevins, which 2 do you got?
Yep, I'm going to go with probably the obvious pick for me, Hangzhou versus Toronto. I talked about it on the flagship. This is 2 just bordering on kind of the mid-level, maybe some kind of pushing up a little bit towards the upper mid. Maybe potentially seeing either team could push down to the lower mid, but 2 very closely contested teams. I think it's a placement match for both. I think this really kind of will solidify either of them in the upper mid to mid lower, I guess. Definitely a lot of potential for map 5 there. And I mean, Toronto players are locked and loaded. You're playing your Toronto players as long as they're actually playing. They're not playing in week 5. That's why I bring that up. The other one I'll go for here is Gladiators versus Atlanta. Gladiators have looked bad recently. Atlanta has looked quite good. However, again, we talked about on the flagship show, I think kind of at least for Gladiators, the record doesn't really speak as much to how good they actually are. I think they're a little bit better than they actually are. Atlanta has had an interesting schedule so far. Has shown a little bit better than a lot of us initially expected. But are they the real deal? This is, again, another placement match. And placement matches generally have the capacity for map 5, though, like A. Smith mentioned with his match, I think this actually could be a 4-0 in either direction, and I wouldn't be that surprised.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that, but I will point out the last one here. You guys might be surprised to hear me say it, but I think Valiant versus Houston has some serious 5-map potential. If you've listened to any of the content I've put out, I think, in the last 3 weeks, you're familiar with my Houston map theory. Route 66 and Volskaya Industries are part of this map pool. So I think while this has 5-map potential, I give more of a boost to the Houston side of things because I'm worried, is KOF going to be competitive? If it is, it's going to be, if it's not, it's going to be a stomp in Houston's favor. And really, so outside those maps, I think Houston's favored in this matchup, but they've got 2 maps. They just love to find ways to lose and manufacture ways to lose those 2 maps. If they happen to lose both of them, it's going to go to 5. And yeah, so I think this one has potential for it. I'm not inflating too many of the Valiant players up out of, obscurity that I wouldn't normally use, but long shot, maybe you can go with like a Kareev or something like that if you really wanted. Agilities has been better actually, so he's obviously the safer of the 2. But
I've got Kareev on my team. He's been doing pretty good.
Yeah, Kareev's fine. I don't think he's much of
like a DPS too.
Yeah, a statistical problem for fantasy. Maybe more of a team problem there. But you can elevate him a little bit, but more the Houston guys, if you're wondering, should I play Raucus in my best game format, I think you can kind of confidently do that. If your team's going to be in a lopsided match, which this could be. You want it to be in your team's favor, and I think it's more likely Houston blows out the Valiant than the other way around. So it's got a little bit of that safety and also the upside if you're talking about Houston players. Now we're going to talk about some oofs here, gentlemen. Some matchups we don't see as particularly close. We don't need to go into too much detail on them in particular. Should I just read them, or do you guys want to go through them?
You can read them.
All right, I'll just read through them. All right, so the potential oofs here are Toronto versus the Chengdu Hunters, the Philadelphia Fusion versus the Valiant. That's probably the least likely of these oofs that I can see. The London Spitfire versus the Shanghai Dragons, the Boston Uprising versus the Florida Mayhem, and the Vancouver Titans against, again, the Chengdu Hunters. Go figure. You need more than a gimmick comp for us to think you're not very likely to be walloped.
Chengdu is going to get oofed both matches. This is going to be ugly.
It could be a rough week for Chengdu.
You might not even start them in a combined.
No, I probably wouldn't, as a matter of fact, except for maybe Kaio. Just flex supports.
I don't know.
Flex supports are so much safer than any other position. It feels like if anybody's going to do well, but I would try not to. That's for certain.
Yeah, if you can avoid it.
All right, so we're going to move things along here. We have our sleepers of the week. That means whoever we pick 3 every week, we each pick 1, okay? 1 support, 1 tank, and 1 DPS. We compete against each other for who gets to pick first in this upcoming week. Asmith won the support category this week. Had a pretty good week as far as sleepers go. So you're going to lead us off here, Asmith. Who is your support sleeper of the week?
I won last week by cheating, by taking a flex support. So I will not cheat this week and let someone else cheat. So I'll go with Closer here. Closer, Dallas Fuel player. Look, he popped off the first, or he scored a lot of points. I don't know if he popped off, but he scored a lot of points against Shanghai, and I think they're playing Shanghai again. I think there's likely to see similar stats, and with stats like that, that's a very high scoring main support.
I was number 2. I went with Masa last week. I really won because I didn't cheat, but it's Blevin's turn to cheat this week, so we'll see how next week goes. I stole his sleeper, so I can't even blame him or his pickup of the week, so I can't even blame him too much. I'm going with Roki here from Toronto. They've got that 5-map potential in the Hangzhou Spark matchup. I really see that one being close. And they do play twice, so regardless of whether or not it's best or combined, I think as far as flex supports go, listen, Roki doesn't lose fantasy points when he makes mistakes and costs the team fights or anything like that. So I don't have to care about that. I can put that part of my, bitter being a fan hat off, for fantasy purposes, and I can just play him because the team has been so good from fantasy points. I really feel locked and loaded, very safe in my number 2 spot as far as sports go for sleepers. Blevins, go ahead and cheat, brother.
Yeah. Okay. So here's the reason why
this isn't too bad. You're fine. You're
semi-justified in this sleeper of the week, which is Dogman for me. The reason I feel justified in it is because I literally picked him up today for my league. I requested to pick him up, so he's probably available in your league.
Which league?
Yeah, I'm not telling you. You're going to put a request in.
I mean, I'm just going to go look at all of them.
I'm double checking all my leagues right now as we speak.
Do you hear our keyboards?
This is the long con. He wasn't actually available. I just wanted you guys to waste time. No, he was available in my league. I was like, I wonder. Oh, there he is. Let's pick him up. So if he was available in our expert leagues, it stands to reason that there's at least some chance that he's available in your league as well. So check it out so I don't feel bad about picking him, because I literally picked him up, which is kind of the point of the sleepers of the week.
Yeah, and this week, though, he did get full play time, so I think that's a really good call and a safe bet. So if he's available on free agency, he shouldn't be anymore. He shouldn't have been as soon as I started using him at 50% usage. But now he's seems to be at 100%. I think that's the right choice for the Atlanta Reign. So all signs are pointing upward for Dogman. I think that's a good pick. I won the tank conversation last week with Dako with 136 points. So I'm going to do it. I'm going to go in on them. Listen, I think the Valiant are going to be able to be competitive in both of their matches this week. I'm going hard on them in my sleepers here. That's going to include Fate. The main tank role specifically has been a little rough. I would think with a couple gimme maps against Houston, with the ups and downs of Philadelphia, I think I'm going to get at least one of those matchups that goes pretty long and is reasonably competitive. Again, none of us, I don't think, of the three really believe the Valiant are as bad as their 0-5 record has them right now. So I'm not overly concerned. Fate is still one of the top end tanks in this league. It just needs to come together for them statistically, and I'm hoping with a couple of potentially close matches here, the Valiant are able to put it together. Blevins, you're up next.
Oh, yes, I am. I definitely am. Up next, yes. So I've got, I had Gamsu last week, didn't quite pan out. It was kind of close. But this week I have got Bumper. Bumper, according to some, a known thrower in terms of being out of position, but a huge playmaker. The Vancouver Titans do, I believe, yes, play twice this week. Again, once is against the Chengdu Hunters, which is a definite oof potential, but also maybe not. Or if they can at least put up some points against the Chengdu after stomping through Chengdu, that'll be good. And they're also playing against Paris Eternal, which could certainly has the capacity to be map 5 potential. I don't necessarily believe it, but it has the possibility. Give me some sweet Bumper action.
Yeah, like Roki, when Bumper charged off of the back of Volskaya and killed himself, he didn't lose any fantasy points. In fact, he gained them because he killed somebody on his way off the map while throwing the point. So you're 100% correct. He's a fragger. So, Asmith, who is your tank sleeper of the week?
Last week I went with Rio. I'm going to not take the main tank. I'm going to take their off tank in Hotba. Look, I think Hotba's got a good matchup here. They are playing the Gladiators, and I think we've mentioned that it has map 5 potential there. Look, play there. I think it's going to go well for you. I don't even think we mentioned it has map 5 potential, but I think it does. So in best format, I think Hotba could end up popping off. He did pretty well this week. So
if the Guangzhou Charge have taught me anything in particular, it's that regardless of who their opponent is, there is serious map 5 potential in their matchup. All right, so that wraps up tanks. We're going to move on to DPS. A-Smith, you're up again. You were on top with DM 185 points last week. Who's the sleeper this week?
Well, I'm certainly not a coward, if that's what you're insinuating, even though I know you weren't insinuating it at all. But hey, you know what? I'm playing Rascal, okay? Look, Rascal took the spot from Architect. Architect played one map, sucked. Then Rascal played the next 3, they won. Then Rascal played the next 4 maps straight, and they won. So you know what? I'm gonna go with Rascal. Looked a lot better. He passed the eye test. Roll with him.
F's in the chat for Architect aside. It would be nice to see them use the same level of conviction in figuring out the rest of their lineup, so that way I could really get a feel for what this team is, and maybe they could progress and improve and get better. It's a weird concept that you might want to do that as a team, I know, but San Francisco seems to just want to shuffle the deck every time as far as their tank line goes anyways. But yeah, we will have to wait and see. I was in second place with Happy, 166 points. I'm not going to go into in-depth logic here. I just did it with Fate. I'm going Kareev. I think he gives you a decent chance at a solid week, and that's what sleepers are all about. But
yeah, I ran the same thing, basically. Go for my not as super high point scoring Vancouver Titan. This is their first week, I believe, with 2 matches, so I guess we'll see how that goes. If anything, it hurts them against the Chengdu Hunters, which they're probably not practicing as much against. But that's better for fantasy because maybe it's a closer match. Give me your Vancouver Titans players here. This will be the first test of seeing how they perform when they had to play 2 matches.
Second test. They played 2 matches in week 2 against the Charge and the Shock, respectively. But nonetheless, it's still far from proven anything about your ability to handle the big weeks. All All right, so that wraps up the sleepers of the week. Real quick, before we move on to the mailbag, I just want to read off the list of teams that play twice, just so that way if you are in combined, you can kind of have that readily accessible, just to use for your reference. I know I refer to our notes for exactly that reason multiple times throughout the week as we're answering questions and I'm setting my own lineups. Both teams from LA, the Gladiators and the Valiant, play twice. We've got the Toronto Defiant, the Chengdu Hunters, stay away, the Paris Eternal, the Vancouver Titans, the Shanghai Dragons, and the San Francisco Shock all play twice. So keep that in mind, combined points people. Those are the teams you would like to target. Let's move into the mailbag here. We have a question from Ivory as the entire mailbag this week. Guys, if you do want to get questions, I know we didn't get to a lot of yours last week. That's a big part of the reason why we changed the format. Don't let that we didn't read your question last week stop you from asking them in the future. It'll always be up and down, hit or miss, whether we get to it or not. Our apologies if we miss it. But it's great to have them for the show, so please do send in any. Ivory wants to know thoughts on who won this trade. Team 1 traded Closer and Finzi in exchange for Team 2's Aid and Seo Min Soo. I'm not going to read off the rest of the rosters. Let's treat this in a vacuum. Gentlemen, do you want to be Team 1 or Team 2? Asmith, go.
I personally, if you're playing for the long haul, I would like to be Team 2 in receiving Closer and Finzi and giving away Aid and Sungmin Soo. I think Sungmin Soo is a meta. He's a meta player, and he's only playing well in this meta right now. I think when the meta shifts the next stage, I don't think we're going to see a lot of Sungmin Soo. And right now, Aid isn't playing. So
yeah, that's my point. Aid is A, not playing right now. B, I think at best, unless Neko for some reason is out, which would be something outside of the game. It would be he either gets hurt or sick or something or traded or whatever, banned for some stupid reason that Blizzard enforces and punishes Toronto for, not Boston. But I'm not bitter. Aid is going to be at best a mixed playtime player probably, or either a like a shot in the dark or a mixed playtime player. You don't want that. So yeah, I'm wanting to be Team 2 here.
I'm going to take the different path here. I'm going to take the road not taken. I'm going to rather be Team 1, giving away Closer and Finzi, picking up 2 players who I believe have significantly higher upside. None of the 4 players involved in this trade are players I'm actively seeking out, looking to own long term. I think Finzi might be at his peak value now, so I feel like I would be selling high if I were to be able to trade away Finzi at this moment. Aid is a little rough, and I think I might cut him, but I would probably just take Seo Min Soo right now in this meta, and then maybe, who knows, going forward, he does have more value than we think. There's been a lot of goofiness enough already to make me think he might be worth holding on to 2 weeks into stage 2, something like that. See how it plays out. But Finzi is right now, I mean, maybe wait until after week 5 to make this trade, because Finzi is so valuable in the shallow week of week 5, stage 1. That's the one part of this that I don't like, just the timing of it. But yeah, instead of Closer and Finzi or starters, and feel like, honestly, harder to cut than these other guys who might pop off. Like, I feel like I can just cut Aid, call Seo Min Soo a long-term stash. So if I'm Team 1 and I've got a good roster, I can see the roster. He's got a pretty solid team here. Then yeah, I kind of like being on that side, betting on upside, giving away players I hopefully don't have to start anyways. That's one way I do make some trades. So just to be a little contrarian here as well, just so all 3 of us don't agree. Yeah, I'll take the Team 1 side of that. But all right, that wraps up the mailbag. Hopefully we've answered Ivory's question thoroughly here. We do have one last thing here before we sign off. Gentlemen, do you know what that is? Well, you didn't want to answer me, so I just went ahead and played the drop anyways.
I figured that's what you're doing. Like, surely.
Yeah, we are remembering the Bellman. He sends us in a meme question almost every week. He's been a little busy as of late, and so have we. Last week, we just plain couldn't fit it in as much as we wanted to, but I did keep his question from last week, and Blevins, we're going to start with you. Mm-hmm. Which two Overwatch League players would be the best casting duo? And he didn't say this. I'm going to say this. You can't pick Jake.
Oh, I wasn't going to pick Jake anyway. Okay. Part one of the casting duo is the second most obvious one besides Jake. That's Dogman, has literally casted, is also a meme lord and hilarious, and also has the high noon bump. So just checking all the boxes here for Dogman. His casting duo that I want to see, and we're gonna suspend disbelief a little bit here and assume that the casters would be able to, I'm going to do this at least. I'm going to assume the casters can speak the same language and are speaking the same language at the same time.
I like that.
I'm going with Fissure because I want some smack talk in there. I want the meme lord. I know you're supposed to have like good cop, bad cop. You're supposed to have the Uber mixed with the Mr. X to like balance each other out. Nope. I want it pushed all the way to the roof. Give me nonstop memes. Give me Fissure. Give me Dogman. Most hype casting duo of all time.
Right.
All right, Asmith, who do you got?
I'm going to take a pair of Brits here. The only pair of Brits in the Overwatch League, and that's Cruz and Fusions. Is it? Yeah, Fusion?
Sure, but they're not the only two Brits in the league.
I was going to say they're not the only two.
Who's the other one?
Boombox, for starters.
Boombox, Boombox. Okay, there's three. My fault. My bad.
R.I.P. Milton.
Yeah.
Sorry, guys. Okay, so I'm taking.
Never forget.
So if you look, oh gosh. Okay, so Cruz is hilarious. I like his fighting spirit, and apparently from everything we've heard, he is a meme lord, and I love myself a good meme lord.
He's a feeder.
Oh, apparently he is.
Because that's what Dogman literally yelled out to the crowd.
True. And apparently I hear Fusions is like one of the loudest people in the world. That's what I've heard. So rumor has it, I could see that being just a really hyped cast with so much British accent that I may not even be able to understand it, but I'll love it anyway.
Yeah, I think I'd like that lineup for about 15 minutes, and then the accents would weigh on me. I have no problems with British people, but your accent does drive me a little crazy at times. I don't know why. It's just the one that gets me. Nonetheless, Asmith, I need to borrow one of your duo because Cruz is absolutely the correct choice. I just need to cut him with a little bit of Custa. I need a little bit of that game knowledge. I need that big brain analysis mixed in there, and I think Custa's exactly the right guy to bring that to the table. I think he's such an easygoing, free-flowing kind of a dude. I think he could pair with somebody like Cruz. He's going to be spitting fireballs like crazy and maybe put out some of those fires before they really get started. And just, I think they would complement each other really, really well. I do love Blevins' Dogman pick. I think I could sub Dogman for Cruz and get exactly the same dynamic I'm looking for here. So yeah, overall, I think those are some pretty solid duos. Although I think Jake with his experience would be cheating, so that's why we couldn't quite put him in. But it's a meme question, so maybe I shouldn't. If you want to screw up the answer to the meme question by using like a technically correct answer or something like that, that should be your prerogative.
I actually want to change my answer. I'm going with Bacon Jack and Yang Zilong, just cause.
All right, so Asmith wanted to screw up his answer. Two people I've never heard speak before to have any analysis whatsoever.
I'm going to change mine too. It's going to be a single caster. It's just Aid. Play Aid. Please play
Listen,
Aid.
That might be a single caster, but as a booth, that booth is an absolute unit, okay? That booth is an absolute unit, and that right there.
I was going to say give me Aid and Hot Bub, but I'm not going to go there.
Booths are only so big. Me and you cast from different rooms, Blevins. It's not even a joke. True. Me and Blevins are big dudes. We don't sit next to each other when we do this because cameras only are so big. Okay. All right. Well, we had enough fun there. Let's wrap up the show, guys. Any parting words, anything like that? Blevins, anything on your way out? Where can people find you on Twitter?
They can find me at _Blevins, and please just play Aid. Give me Aid. Give me aid. Give me aid. Okay.
You can't just get rid of aid. Aid is permanent. Asmith, any parting words? Where can we find you on Twitter?
Find me at asmith_OW. Hit me up. Find me all those questions. Fire me some questions. I'll hit you up with that knowledge. Look, I'm number one in the Unlimited League as of this moment. Don't at me, Beardface. Anyways.
There may be a problem with the unlimited leaderboards, full disclosure, but nonetheless, Asmith is technically correct, which is, outside of a meme question, the best kind of correct. So you can find me on Twitter at HNP DeathBlow. You can find the show on Twitter at HNP_FOWL Play. Also at High Noon Podcast. If you're a fan of the show, want to hear about the flagship show, Around the Payload, which is back this week, and always a blast. So make sure you guys follow us really everywhere in order to get the full High Noon Productions experience. For Asmith, for the Blevins, I am DeathBlow, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will see you all next week.
See you.
Got his boots and he put on his hat. He threw the coin away that same day. It's in his past and he's not looking back. He says, finding mine now, God's my way. He's not good, but he sure ain't bad. He'll make amends for the sins that he has. He says, I'll change the